Hi, I'm Paul Haynes, and today I'm going to demonstrate pruning roses. We're going to use this example of Heaven Sent with a beautiful perfume, and I'm going to show you how to prune this. Now you might look at this and say, it has flowers on it. Why would you prune it now? You're probably also looking at me and saying, you're wearing shorts. How can it possibly be winter? Well, I'm here on a beautiful warm day in sunny Queensland where we don't really get much of a cold winter. It's a subtropical climate, it's a little bit warmer. So I assure you I am in winter. It's 24 degrees Celsius and it's beginning to get time to prune. So that brings me to the next question. When do we prune? So pruning generally is the 8th week of winter, which in Australia means the end of July, last weekend of July. Now if you get frost in your area, you might be looking at mid-August. Look at 2 or 3 weeks later when the last major frost is cleared, because frost will cause damage to new growth and new buds. Why should I be pruning this? Why is simply to give it a revitalization, get rid of some of this unproductive growth that you see, some of the dead growth that's on here, some dead growth down the bottom. We're going to give it a better chance and a revitalization. It's like sending it for a spa day so it feels better and it has a bit of a break. In a really cold climate, what you're actually doing is the plant will go a bit dormant and you're giving it that chance to rest while it goes dormant. Because I live in a warmer climate, we're not really having to do that as much. So what we'll do, instead of cutting the plant down to knee high, as you've probably learnt, you can do things a little bit differently. We'll cut this bush down about 1/3 or 1/2 of the height of the bush, and that's adequate. It actually works in almost every climate. You'll hear people say, no, you have to prune it right down to the bottom for a bounce prune or something to try and get new water shoots up. Look, that's great on a younger plant. This bush of Heaven Sent would be about 7 years old. We planted it at a previous property. It's been transplanted into this location about 5 years ago. The thing with this is it hasn't sent up water shoots for years. The chance of it doing so this year is slim. You can see down here we've got these nice big solid canes. There's a couple a little bit older. We'll get rid of some of the older dead growth and we'll concentrate on the newer growth and concentrate on getting this bush to where its maximum potential is. Now that's ignoring some of the rules that you would have heard. I'm going to teach you how to ignore some other rules as well. Let's make rose gardening simple. Rose gardening should be just as easy as any other gardening that you do. It really doesn't have to be a challenge. Now, what tools do you need to get started? Well, firstly I'd say get yourself a good pair of leather gloves. Now the reason for this bush, I can run my hand up. It's not a very thorny one that I've picked. It doesn't have many prickles on it. You'll find some bushes like next to us is a cardinal. The cardinal's a lot thornier. I'd be definitely wanting the gloves. I have a tendency of just wearing a glove on my left hand, which is the hand that I'm grabbing the stem with, but certainly using on both hands is a good way to clean out through the bush. Now, apart from gloves, the next thing that's important, and I've got a really good place to put the gloves, tucked into the back of your pants, a good pair of secateurs. I can't recommend this enough. The most important thing is sharp secateurs. Now, I don't have a sponsorship from anybody for secateurs. I recommend these freely. I bought them myself, retail. These are Felcos. What I use is Felco number 7, which has a rotating handle. The rotating handle, my wife doesn't cope with. It takes some getting used to. It takes about 1/3 of the pressure out of cutting. And from looking behind, you can see we've got lots of rose bushes. We have about 500 rose bushes in the ground. So pruning them takes some effort, and I like to reduce that as much as possible. It also gives me a bit more strength to cut through thicker stems. Traditional secateurs, what my wife has is a simple set that doesn't have the rotating handle. These are also Felcos. They're a number 6, which is a straightforward set. I think Felco number 2 is the most common. You can buy those at any garden centre or home improvement store, but you can buy other brands. I've had these for close to 10 years, the same pair. I've never replaced the blade. I just sharpen them and they just work. The other things to buy or to have are a good pair of loppers. When you get to these thick canes down here, you either want to use loppers, and you can buy loppers with a telescopic handle, and that gives you more leverage and gives you a bit more strength for cutting those thick branches. And also a pruning saw. You can see this one's a bit rough and a bit poorly looked after. We don't use the pruning saw too much here. Some really thick branches that you can't cut easily will be more easily cut with a pruning saw, or if you have a little bit less strength in your hands or your arms, you might prefer a saw to loppers because it's easy to use. So for most of what we do today, I'll use the secateurs. Now, you'll hear a lot of times, you would have heard, oh, you have to cut to an outward facing bud. Oh, you have to cut at a 45-degree angle. You have to cut a certain distance above the bud. There's all these extra rules that you just have to worry about if you're growing roses. Okay, forget it all, please. Let's make rose growing no harder than growing a gardenia or a camellia. Let's make it simple. I think it's actually easier for me to grow these than camellias. Okay. I'm just going to give you an example of what a bud is. Now, when we talk about a bud, a lot of people say to me, what is a bud? Behind each leaf, there's a little knob that's a bud. And what that is, that will be the new growth that a new stem grows from. So you can see here, where the plant's been cut, this was a bud, it sent out a new stem. Now, notice on the other side, it sent out a stem going into the plant. So when people say cut to an outward facing bud, the idea is to try and get the plant to grow outwards and create this nice candelabra effect. The reality is one stem comes out, one stem goes in. Would it matter if this one was the one going out and this one was going in? No. So it doesn't matter which order, it's going to happen naturally. So don't worry about which way the bud's facing, just worry about cutting to, or don't worry about anything, but just think about cutting to a nice good bud on a nice good stem, rather than which way it's facing. How far above the bud do we cut? What we say is the same thickness as the stem. So if the stem here is about 10 millimeters thick, you'd cut about 10 millimeters above the bud. Don't worry too much. If in doubt, cut the same distance, cut about 5 millimeters above the bud, or 1/4 of an inch in imperial terms. And that's a simple way of looking at it. Do we need to cut at an angle? Look, I do out of habit, it's not necessary. The idea of an angle is if the plant's dead upright and you cut at an angle, water won't sit on it, frost won't sit on it, snow won't sit on it. You can see we don't get snow here, never will. But that's great if the stem is directly upright like this. If the stem is at an angle like this and I cut at an angle here, I've just made a flat surface. So don't get too stressed about it. For me it's habit, for you it shouldn't have to be. The other thing I'd say with a stem, with cutting, is cut, just lost that flower now so I can't do this demonstration anymore, cut with the blade facing downwards. Now, on the secateurs, you'll see on the secateurs there's an anvil part and a blade part. The anvil is just flat, that the blade cuts and bypasses away. I don't like the secateurs that cut into an anvil because it crushes the stem. So the thing with a bypass secateur like this, the knife goes past, cuts smoothly, and it gives you a very clean cut. So what happens, you need to cut with that blade on the bottom side of the cut. The reason for that is this anvil will bruise the stem where it pushes against it. So if we cut this way, you're bruising the stem that's left behind on the bush, and that can give you an opportunity for disease to enter the bush. So the concept is cut with the blade facing down. That's a simple rule. It's not critical. If you forget to do it, or if you're in a position where your hand doesn't get right, don't worry too much about it. But so what we've said is don't worry about outward facing buds, don't worry too much about the distance. If in doubt, just 1/4 of an inch, half a centimeter. But you know, ideally the thickness of the stem, if you're on a really thick stem, you just need that little bit extra amount. But don't worry too much. Now, just cut this flower off, but thinking about the size I want to cut this bush to. We want to revitalise this bush, but we don't want to strip it completely bare and make it struggle to get going and struggle to get some energy. We really just want to prune it back so that all the energy is going into some new growth and new strength. So what I say in Queensland, and as I say, applies to anywhere, instead of cutting to knee height, think about the height of the bush and cut 1/3 to 1/2 off the top of the bush. So not cutting to 1/3 of the size, cutting 1/3 off. So you can see here where we pruned last year was about half the height of the bush, a little bit higher in some spots, but it's really going to be giving it a chance to grow back well without going too crazy on it. So the first thing I'm going to do with this bush is I'm going to just cut the top off generally, get an idea of where we're going to go, and then I'm going to go through and cut off the unproductive and dead side of things once I can sort of get a picture. So when I'm doing this general cut, what we're going to do now is we're going to cut the top off the bush, stand back, have a look at the bush and see what we want to do. So I want to cut off about here, and you can see I've got my glove on one hand. These will make great cuttings as well if you want to propagate and make some new plants from them. Again, I do a step-by-step guide to that in the book as to how to do it. But I'm just going through quickly first and getting rid of the top of the bush. While you're at it, you might want to cut some flowers and have a bucket with you, cut flowers as you go, stop and smell the roses, enjoy them. I didn't bring a bucket with me today. Okay. Unfortunately, you'll probably cut off some nice buds that would have been flowers in a few weeks' time. It's a bush next to it, I'm just getting that out of the way. Okay, so what you can see here is I've cut about 1/3 of the top of the bush. Now what I want to do is look at where is there something that's unproductive, that's not doing anything. Where is there something that's dead, an old cane? So if you look in here, you can see here this is a nice old cane. Very hard for me to get in with my secateurs and get that out, but what I've also got here is a bit of dieback. So I'm get the plant next to you. So cutting out that dieback, this dead growth, you can see the growth here. I've cut it down below where the death is, where the dieback's gone. Really what I want now is my loppers, and we'll get in with the loppers. See if I can get in here so you can still see. Put the lopper in here and cut through, and that's where you want your second glove on. To cut out some of this dead growth, the older, I can see there's little branches sticking off the side here. These little small unproductive branches, it's a little stem, got not much growth on it. It's not going to produce flower growth off that, so we can just lop those off, and I can use the loppers for that. Couple more in here. Okay. The next step in this, there are small canes in the bush that don't produce strong growth, little tiny thin canes. We want to get rid of all of those. Or if you have a stem that only produces those canes, there's nothing strong or good coming off it, let's get rid of those as well. So I'm just looking here and going, things that aren't very productive. You see I'm cutting one way and the other way, but not always. Okay. I look at this and I think there's a nice cane here, there's not a hell of a lot coming off here. Once I cut off the hopeless bits, is there a point in leaving all this on? I don't think so. What I try and do is look at how much growth's coming out of it, how much energy. Not much in that case. I don't like leaving these little sticks on the side. But you see, I'm not spending a lot of time thinking about, is it outward facing, is it inward facing? My height's about right. I do cut at an angle because it's habit, but it's not necessary. Little tiny bits like this that are just sitting off the side that aren't doing anything are pointless. All of that. You can see here I've got one crossing back in the middle. Not too worried about that at the moment. But there's stems here that are just not doing much for me. And you can see it's starting to tidy up very quickly. If we look at this one, what I look at and say, I've got a little spindly stick here, little spindly stick here, spindly stick, spindly nothing. Is there anything decent coming off this whole stem all the way down? No. So do we need it? No. I could, there's a couple of options. I could cut it back down here to where there's a good bud, but I've got these other growth off this branch. My inclination is to go down and just take the whole thing off. You see, with a good sharp set of secateurs, that was quite a thick branch, I just take it straight off. Same with this one. It's not producing a lot. It's time to go. You see, I've cut the bush down quite a bit, but I'm taking it, we're not knee high, we're waist high. We've got a couple of longer stems here. This one's coming back to the middle. I'm just going to take that leaf off and I'll explain. What we want to do is pretty much take all of the growth off, all of the leaves off, unless you've got a new big water shoot. Water shoots you want to keep and treat separately and stake them. And identifying water shoots is important. Chapter 17 of my book talks about water shoots and how to identify them. So an important thing during the process that I haven't done a lot here is to come back, step back and look at the plant. Look at the bush from different angles and you can see how you're doing. Am I cutting enough away? You can see I've cut quite a lot away from this bush. What I'm going to do now is you've got a few less productive canes in here, and again, sometimes getting your hand around to turn it that way, don't worry too much about it. Okay, so here, these weren't really big, strong, extra growth. What I'm trying to do is get back to here, where we've got a cane that's going to produce something that's a decent growth. I've got this one coming back on itself. I'll get rid of that. Actually, I'll get rid of that whole stem on the basis that this should send out new growth as well, and this will send out new growth, and that's where the stems will come out. Just have a look at these, and I've been inclined to leave it to these couple up here. Get rid of this, get rid of this, and I'm pretty happy with that. The idea here, now you can see this is where you've got to check. This was my original cut where I started, and it's quite a bit higher than the bud, so I'm just going to cut that back. Not necessary, but I'm going to lop that off. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Now this one does cross back on itself a little bit. I'll show you a trick. So what I've done here is getting a piece of another piece of stem. I cut the side branches off, and what I want to do, this is a little trick. I want to push this cane back here to try and get growth back this way as well, so the plant's not all going in one direction like a band, and I need to cut it about there. Okay. You can see here I pushed this stem away, and this stem, instead of crossing across this way, is now coming back this way. That branch will die, but it's going to hold that stem out in that direction, and that's a little trick and a way that you can move your branches around if they're not quite in the position once you've pruned it. I'm quite happy with that prune. I pruned a little bit higher than last year. I might just, you know, go around and tidy it up a little bit, check where I've actually cut, because some of these were the rough first cuts. Other than that, very happy with that prune. The next thing to do with this plant, which is equally important, is I'm going to spray this with a spray of lime sulfur. Now you want to do this fairly quickly, ideally within a couple of days, if not within a week. The spray with lime sulfur, what it does is it kills off a lot of the bacteria and fungus that will overwinter, in that it will stay on the plant during winter and it will come back with vigor as soon as you get some heat. Now, living in Queensland, that means straight away. So what we want to do is spray this with lime sulfur, kill off the black spot, kill off the powdery mildew, kill off the anthracnose. Sorry about the lorikeets in the background, if you can hear them, they're very happy. But you're killing that off so that it's not coming back in the new growth and the new foliage doesn't have it. The reason to spray it quickly is all of these buds where we've just pruned, the energy from the plant is now going to work on these top buds and going to send out growth. Lime sulfur will actually burn those buds. It will also burn foliage. So that's why you're taking off all the foliage. If you've got a new water shoot coming out, which is the big red new cane, then don't spray that with lime sulfur. Don't pull all the leaves off. Treat that, stake it separately, treat that carefully, because you don't want to burn that. That's the new growth for the plant. If you've got those, great. The last thing I'll show you, and I'm going to get my saw and my loppers, is what we can do. There's a few little dead bits down here. I can take those off, just clean up the plant. Just as if there's anything obvious. Look, ideally you want to pick up all of these dead leaves as well, clean up around the plant. It's a good time as a general cleanup. You don't need to fertilise at this time. So I can get rid of some of this dead stuff with a saw, some of these things. If I really want to, it's not really important. So the next thing you can do with your plant. I've talked about water shoots, and then an old bush like this hasn't had many water shoots come up in a long time. How you can encourage them? There's a couple of things you can do. One, get your secateurs. Just knock around the graft union, around the big bud, the big lump that's on the bottom of the plant. That can help encourage new shoots to come out. If there are little shoots that are there, don't knock them with your secateurs and knock them out. You want to encourage those. So it's very important not to knock those off. The other thing you can do is wait a few weeks until your plant's got some growth going back on it, and then you can put a little handful of Epsom salts around the plant, water it in, or you can put it in a watering can and water it in straight with a watering can. And that, my friends, that's how to prune a rose. It's very simple. Don't make it too complicated. Simple is best. The last thing I'm going to say to you is everything I've done today, apart from putting this little stick in, is covered by my book. It's got a step-by-step guide. It's got a guide in terms of all of the things like putting Epsom salts on, what water shoots are, how to identify them, how to fertilise, when to fertilise, how to propagate. So all this material that we've cut off today, I could be making new roses from that. And that's something you can do for a bit of extra fun. How I learned all of this was from being a member of a Rose Society. So Rose Societies not only offer you lectures and information and the enjoyment of catching up with other people who love roses, but they offer you a lot of information with members who are more than willing to share, like I have today, how to do things in your gardens, how to do things with roses. So everything I've learnt with growing roses has been from talking with other members or having been demonstrated by other members. That includes going to things like a pruning day. There are worldwide events that you go to. So recently I spent time in China looking at a rose garden with 100,000 rose bushes in it. Some amazing things that you see as a member of a Rose Society. At the end of this video there'll be a couple of links as to Rose Societies around Australia and the World Federation of Rose Societies, which will be able to put you in touch with a Rose Society in your country. So please consider, for a very nominal fee, supporting your local Rose Society in the good work they do, and you'll also receive benefits such as magazines, books, information from them as well. So please consider it, and thank you for watching. I look forward to catching up with you again on a video soon.